This is Sonic Vibrations, and I am Michael Macmillan. Dubmorphology is Gary Stewart and Trevor Mathison, and they are renowned across the UK and around the world as experimental sound and visual artists who blur the boundaries between audiences, artists, and participants. I've collaborated with Dubmorphology on numerous projects, and here they talk about their musical heritage and unique practice, as well as sharing sonic examples of their work.
Well, ladies, original, strictly original music in the place to keep the place rocking alive. See? Look. Check. Yo. Whoa.
Shall I kick off slightly then? A little bit. Just a little bit. I suppose what I find fascinating culturally is that, okay, Jamaican parents grew up in inner city Birmingham. The particular bit of Birmingham that I grew up in as well, Balsall Heath, was in the fringes and in the margins, the hinterland, so to speak. I think it's significant in terms of my own upbringing that my grandmother was of Cuban descent. I'm a total mix up person. Syrian, Lebanese, Cuban, Indian, Chinese, listening to all the kind of marimba and different music, particularly from my grandmother's side. My older brother, Steve, he left for foreign when he was 18. He had actually come over from Jamaica when he was 13 to UK, but it never worked out. So he brought this other sense, and he was particularly keen that my worldview wasn't just simply located within Balsall Heath or whatever. Then I had my mix-up period, which I'm still in, by the way. Well, I was loving the kind of emergence of what you might call Black consciousness, particularly 76, in terms of the hot summer and everything else. Or even prior to that, no, it'll be skanga in it and all that. Skanga. The fact was, I equally enjoyed that, along with the Jim Reeves, the country and western from my mother, but also the emergence of sort of like early tape experimentation stuff that my brother was kind of introducing me to, which meant that you could do these rudimentary, quite crude spatializations at the same time as being firmly enmeshed within the kind of like Black culture. Standing outside Barnabas Church, like we all did. Barnabas Church was where the sound system was. I can't get inside the sound system. Your first kind of like conscious kind of like engagement like that outside of the house blues is this muffled, deep sound coming through, you know what I mean? It's significant to say that that's all happening concurrently with this other sensibility, curiosity and inquisitiveness to experiment. That then carried on when my brother bought me my first Denshi kit, which was a kit from Japan. These little kind of plastic blocks with components inside them. And you'd make kind of like radios and all that kind of stuff, if you see what I mean, and little amps. And then, going to college and, I even remember the first year at college and being into things like Being Boiled. Remember Being Boiled from Human League, the kind of the emergence of improvisation and free form. Fast forwarding to like being in the turbo sound system. My own specific cultural background is a complete mashup, but a sense of joy and awe. As I continue to find out more about the roots of dub and Black music, I'm still astounded and astonished by things that I learn all the time. And as Trevor knows, and we'll go on to talk about this, the unknown Black practitioners within the avant-garde, which we continue to still excavate and try and shed light on. So, I'll hand over to Trevor, but yeah.
Again, it's the same. It's like, for me, brought up in Walthamstow, Caribbean parents again, classic traditional kind of background, church, like Church of England, then Pentecostal. We started like going to like the white church, and then afterwards that didn't really work out so tough, so we ended up going to like a Black pastor church, and that was because the vibe was different. Like the one was very subtle. You could see the numbers and you could work out how many songs you have to sing that morning or that afternoon. And then that had a certain rigidness. Like when you went to the black church, there's a certain sort of flow seeming to be there. Musically, again, the K-Tel collection or Liberace, all them, that kind of. So my brothers was what brought the other musics in. We had a neighbour who was into the Beatles. So my older brother was like friends with him, so they had that kind of scene. And then the reggae sort of came in a bit later, as I remember. Christmas, my dad bought us like a tape recorder, and we also had another tape machine in the house. That was always interesting to hear when things were recorded and the tape got twisted. It's like this playing around with the gram, where you're playing around with the bass and treble, and then it's fixating on the idea of how different frequencies could be sort of cut out. There's that sort of sense of like you could play around with the stuff or the sound.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's a question of how the music has been made. So there's that part of thinking like, well, you have to be going to like a music school or something to be able to make the music that you heard. So like there's a sort of this otherness of music. So the other people made music, you don't. The possible way of manipulating sound or hearing unusual sounds inside of the music became another thing. So like in listening to Perry or hearing sort of like different effects and trying to work out how that got inserted into the music, or seeing that as music as well. So like you have the sound of the refrigerator or the sort of frequencies you pick up on and thinking that's a good starting point. The same thing where listening to the sound system or going to a sound system, going to a house party and you hear that bass. In the room it sounds one way, in the kitchen it sounds one way, out on the street it sounds another way. All you're hearing is like the layers of voices, screams, shouts, and then that sort of that pounding signal again. Then going to college and then going to other gigs and thinking, okay, there's another body of music that's as interesting or as alien to what I would normally be listening to. What I find interesting is the methodology of how people made the music, you know, about Lee Perry, how he made his music. And even like thinking, well, it must be a big plush studio, but you realise it's either a 4-track studio, but the sounds were so rich. There's that sort of trying to understand that, and also there's the idea of juxtapositioning that between jazz or how people jam together or play together, but create another cadre or movement, which becomes like another marker in history again, like another sonic footnote. Then listening to John Peel, who would play Burning Spear or Bob Marley, and seeing that on the Old Grey Whistle test. My brother liked Hendrix, and I thought, dude, it's like it's some like some white man. Then so you feel alienated to your own cultural music, you know, it's sonic history again. So it's been a long way of trying to reconnect to that part, or even say, well, actually, this R&B or rock and roll is your own thing. So like Little Richard or Howlin' Wolf. So that there's all influences that you either say, no, this is because other people take it on board. You sort of felt distant towards it. Like then you realise, and actually, this is your own stuff. This is as much yours as anybody else's.
I was going to say, that's such a good point you made there. I love what you said there about feeling alienated from your own thing, because it reminds me very much of the early recorded sound experiment stuff, which greatly expanded my own interest in kind of popular music as resistance beyond reggae, you know, in terms of jazz, funk, early years, rap and punk rock and all that. Whilst it expanded like that, then it all led back to the source, and that's what I love about what you were saying there. And also, it's fascinating that in retrospect, regardless of the abstraction that was taking place in our interests, there was still this political kind of underpinning. It may not have been in a didactic or literal form, but certainly, you know, everything was about a revolutionary or shifting or trying to change circumstances or your environment in some shape or form.
Or that's the right to to experiment, and even though for those experiments to be valid in itself. Because even I take the idea, like we look at the Egyptian sculptures, you know, the Sphinx or the sort of like Egyptian figurines, and if you can, they are seen as classical pieces, those sculptures. But what we're looking at is the armature, because the sculpture itself will be painted. So I'm thinking of it in the same way we're listening to music. What we're seeing now is like maybe the armature of something else. When electrification became a part of the blues, that changes the way that the sound played. There's some distortion, but you get this sort of feedback, and that makes the music keep. And if there's a small space, the blues party would be charged with discordant signals of feedback, which is parts of the audience, part of the band, but there being energy. So when they record that or play that back, there's a certain inbuilt energy wired in. So what we start to hear is that people try to say, well, how do you get that sound? What do you have to do so you put a microphone in the bass bin and then you feed, you know, so it's like a way of using technology to reconfigure the thing that you imagine that you hear in that live session or in a recording, and you try to emulate that again. Well, I get excited is the idea of how you can use different technologies to make other sounds, even though you're trying to replicate something else. It may not be that by the time you finish with it, but you've still got the potential to expand the ideas or an idea around that signal.
But I know you. There isn't much to say about myself.
And in addition to that, it's interesting when you consider at a time when the recording industry or the sound industry was going through crisis in the 80s because of the overblown, expensive, these studios which cost an arm and a leg, and the kind of like the domination of particular kind of like record producers and labels and all this kind of stuff. So you have the explosion of the home studio. Whilst that is well documented, what isn't acknowledged so widely is the early stuff was fraught with all kind of problems, synchronization. You couldn't do this, couldn't do that. So-called limitations in sampling. But Black folk were able to subvert that and use what was a so-called limitation to create really quite magical and incredible music. Rather than seeing it as a point of frustration, we'd come up with new creative techniques and genres from those so-called limitations.
Even remember watching like Tomorrow's World talking about samplers, and then they had like the first sampler, and they said, well, here we got is this thing called sample, and it's like oh, this may be a while because it may get rid of musicians. And what they've got the technology to do is reproduce classical music. This is a flute. Then the idea is, well, actually this technology could be made into something else. So you pick out different elements within that record or within the environment that you use that as a basis to create a new set of sounds, and that becomes the groove again. But then we say, well, within the sound systems, what is it about re-sculpting the sound through its layers again? It's like, we're not getting rid of a problem in the track, we're getting rid of bands which enable the rest of the track to open up. So we hear different things within that space again. So that's why, again, like with the guys playing the graphic equalizer, can take out the bass and just have to chip this, you know, and you can feel it, or you can literally see the smoke sort of in response to it. Yeah, so it's like so people are using the technology to actually re-sculpt the signal on the sound as it's been played off of the vinyl. So even like the pitted vinyl is like, it's got that, even that noise, that the glitch, it becomes a sound piece with our German brothers again. That becomes the basis. It's too clean. You need to sort of give it some weight. So even like playing around with distortion is now as much as a part of sonic appreciation of the tracks as well. For me, it was trying to give myself permission to make this kind of music, feeling that it is okay. You have every frigging right to make this shit. Because it's self-evidently the right thing to do for you. So you have the right to be impressed by the sound of the babbling brooks, the crackle of the flames, to feel excited about the possibility of the sounds being turned into like an emotional key that unlocks somebody's memory or emotional journey. Let's be constantly inspired or enthusiastic about what sound can do, and try to work out how you can use it in a creative sort of way in relationship to a question or an answer that you're trying to put forward in relationship to a performance piece or a film piece. This is what I hear in this space. This is my reasonings for using this. I've got this bit of kit here that does this. I think it'd be an interesting way of manipulating this to do this. So that's basically how I sort of see it. I'm thinking when it's like news items or radio discussion programs, I started recording the conversations, the phone-ins, because I thought that would be useful in some way. And then doing the cut-up, chopping up phrases, so like you sprinkle these sort of like pearls of wisdom to be in conversation with the noise. There's a mood music around us already, so what better way to insert these statements, not in praise of the person who's speaking, but to show the way they're saying stuff has a certain idiotic ring to it that can be played like a mantra that gets played through. Again, like in the tape slide, they don't know who they are, what they are. That was one of the phrases that was inserted into the piece. But that also had like a mesmeric play as well, used as another poetic cut-up method, but with another post-industrial feel to it, but with a sort of abstracted dub feel, because the bass line is like a dub thing, but it's not playing on the same meter. It's not about trying to reproduce reggae or dub music in the classical sense, but it's taking the form or elements from that and then using that as a way of inspiring to make other sounds based around that. Ride the red signal. But if it worked, it worked. But then it's being able to be able to control the sound thing. It's not just noise for noise sake, in the sense you try to be a sonic architect, try to build something that has its movement or refrain. That's also a thing that Teeth from pervades again, is this the idea of setting the raga, finding this sort of poetic voice or tone that sets the thing. Then you can dive down under the carpet and then pull up the floorboards. Then you have the release where this breaks down. So even the ending, how you end the track, has another way of like setting up how you get into the next track or the next movement.
To state the obvious, that period of time, I mean, Trevor's working with Black Audio Film Collective, so similarly at the same time I'm working in theatre productions with Banner Theatre in Birmingham and Strange Fruit up in Nottingham, looking at the political context of that time is transformed through musical production, and similarly thinking about alternative storytelling, you know, special approaches to sampling and other things like that, all in service of how you articulate yourself in terms of like the political landscape. So we're both fully engaged with that, and all that brings itself to bear in our kind of current practice throughout that time. Certainly in the time in question that you're talking about, that's how we were operating.
To answer how we got together is we had this joint journey, I guess. We're on a similar sort of pathway, but crossing over at different points or intersecting at different points over different sort of projects and friendships. And then at some point you said, well, there's no other game in town, why not?
Let's annoy people jointly.
Yeah. We can annoy people by ourselves, or we can do it together. And so far, that's dumbfounded a few people.
The essence of it is it's like a living laboratory in formal education that back in the past, certainly, even those places that were seemingly open and provided just an environment, still somehow, ironically, or the paradox, would be quite conventional in their thinking and where they might go, because they were speculating on the future in a way that they shouldn't do really, and not giving space to things to emerge in a way that you can't anticipate. Our modus operandi is to provide each other with a non-agenda space to experiment and to express ourselves in a way that wasn't confined by normal expectations. This means that we don't have to agree with each other all the time. It just so happens that I feel fortunate that most of the time we agree about stuff, about how we're going to do things. That isn't an absolute necessity. It's a dialogue and a conversation between ourselves. It's also an exploration of ambiguity and the fact that spaces are far more complex than they might appear at any given moment. And I kind of like growing tired of people just simply making things two-dimensional all the time as well. Well, first and foremost, we are a laboratory of ideas, and that gives us carte blanche to do anything we like in many respects.
You sent me a link to one of these noise concerts where these guys are using feedback to fully into noise, and they were out in the street with like their battery-powered speakers and foot pedals, and the guy had a microphone and he's dragging it across the floor, he's hitting it, he's doing all manner of things just to get feedback, and they was just riding these signals. And the people are just standing there looking at them thinking, wow. The guy sort of explained what it was. It's like they're doing it in a sort of like heavy metal kind of way. There's a range of possibilities that you keep getting introduced to. It's just like taking an aspect of dub and saying, okay, the bit that we're interested in is that when it gets noisy, or when the needle goes onto the record, or just the hum of the amp, or when the record stops, you get that, and that's where we start to investigate the sonic possibilities, where it is either reaching through the archives and finding voices to speak in place of us speaking, but evokes a certain cultural and political memory that locates this noise, or places this noise in a grounded historical context.
It would be remiss of us to not mention that a really important part of our practice has been how we engage with archival material and historical artifacts, ephemera, collections, because that's part of our modus operandi, the fundamental way that we work with collections, the idea of the dynamic archive, the idea of engaging with the collection in a theoretical way, in a kind of like a rigorous way, but also dynamic from the point of view, bringing it to life and thinking of innovative ways of doing that is at the nexus of this whole thing to creativity, technology, history, culture. So that's been the means for us to kind of like explore those shifting intersections as well between and those kind of boundaries that Trevor was talking about as well, between audiences and authorship and participation. So I think another thing that's worth saying or remembering is that Dubmorphology is very much, it's a sensual thing. It's all about hedonism and the pursuit of pleasure. We create imaginative spaces. People, they come to our events, our gigs, our installations, whatever, because they want to be immersed and seduced by what we do, and we enjoy doing that. It's a reciprocal thing. We're very much in tune or understanding in terms of the power of not just music but visuals, but the whole, creating again these environments. Trevor comes from he's still a visual person. I'm still a visual person. Yeah, I mean, it's because we're thinking holistically.
Remember, come over the software. If it was the first Apple that turned sound into visuals. There's like basically fractal.
Right. Yeah.
It basically turned like you play a track and it responded to the. So to me, there is always that sort of try to find that interplay between the sonic and the visual, real-time juxtapositioning of sound and image, because that's the interactive bit where the audience become like the authors themselves, or they're enabled to actually engage with the piece. And I think we've done Passport to Pimlico.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Sort of cut up, which enabled the student or the people to sort of play along with another narrative that's unfolding. One of the things that was interested in is the video mapping. That takes it from that. So instead of being an interior kind of conversation that you're setting up, you take it outside, projects these images on the skin of a building, and then that becomes like the interrogation of that space, investigation of that space, because that, again, is like you find, say if you went to, say like Barclays Bank, for argument's sake, then you've got layers of history that could be engaged with the building. So the building is alive with its past in the present. So that's also the things that I quite like, that the idea, some of the places that we go to or been to, we can actually reinsert or reinvestigate or
Yeah, I think,
not architects, what's the thing, is archaeologists.
Yeah. For audiences, stepping into an environment takes them outside of their day-to-day life, places them somewhere else. Plus an invitation. It's not like we're inviting them into a space for them to just be passive, but rather to be fully engaged, to enable this sense again of hippiness, oneness. But it's true.
We've been to places and it's like, well, there isn't a black avant-garde. There's either a thought that you're supposed to make regular music, formal regular music, from classical down to like your jazz or your hip hop, your reggae, your soul. Certain people can experiment, but not you.
They will acknowledge Perry, and there'll be other people, King Tubby, whoever, you know what I mean? Yeah. They will acknowledge them as avant-garde practitioners, but they'll still kind of box it in. So they've got their canon. They'll properly acknowledge them, but it's still not in a way that fully acknowledges that there are people actively engaged right now.
It's a bit like, you know, in those American movies where the guy pulls up to a dance and the guy throws him the keys because he thinks he's the guy who's supposed to park the car. Sometimes I feel like when we go to some of these things, I'm waiting for the fucker to say, hey, can you park my... They're looking at you, why are you here? Are you part of the catering service or something? You know what we should do? We should put that on the rap and we should just put out our own shit. I mean, literally, just set up our own record label and done. Invite people that we find interested and let them make stuff on our thing.
It's always been the way, though, isn't it? Fragments of disconnection. Again, the irony and paradox of what I was saying about those which supposedly are avant-garde and champions for seeking to support work outside of the mainstream, but they impose their own walled gardens. It's a classic cycle, isn't it? And sometimes I think it's even more powerful because it's not seemingly overt on their part. It's just who they are, isn't it?
There's things for us to still learn and to push forward on. I don't think we're exhausted it. I don't think we're at that stage of cynical. We're more excited to do shit now. But the other part of it is that, well, is it going to pay? Are you going to get paid for it? Or are you going to do it anyway because you want to do it? Will there be anybody interested in seeing it? I don't know. Going out and seeing what other people are doing and saying, well, we're not that bad that we can't justify or be amongst these other people. So the key thing is having opportunity to continually to show and explain what the things that we're interested in and to find other fellow travelers along that way and be supportive of their quest or their interest and for them to be supportive of us. It's a non-destructive engagement with sound.
What's good about what you're saying there, and it's true, is that prior to the current situation that we're all experiencing, Trevor and I, and like other like-minded people, were organizing small soirees. And we've already mapped out a whole, Trevor was going to play at the next one in Brixton. We're still curious, we're still hungry, we still have sense of urgency, that sense of globally feeling connected and wanting to converse with other people. There's no point waiting on no institution to support this or to validate or give you the stamp of approval. Just get on with it, as has always been the case historically. And there may well be 2 men and a dog at your place, or there may not. Yeah. Actually, it tends to be the opposite, that they're actually well attended. You'll find that if you like the field of dreams and if you build it, they will come. It's really gratifying to find that there are like-minded people who similarly share the same kind of ideas and are willing to explore. And I'm excited about that. We are excited by the emergence of, you know, the younger crew as well. I mean, that is really, that to me is, it's really lovely to see.
Well, ladies, original, strictly original music in the place to keep the place rocking alive. See? Look. Check. Yo. Whoa.
Dubmorphology bringing to being a form of black techno-poetics. This is echoed in their sonic signatures that you will hear as you navigate sonic vibrations.